Hey everyone, it is Thursday morning. You know what that means. We bring Jonathan Twomley back and we start with unemployment claims. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. And so this morning, when I was checking my email and Facebook and stuff, an article popped up that we'll talk about in a bit about the coming debacle in commercial real estate. But the banner headline across the top flashed up in red: uh, unemployment, unexpectedly high, right? Something to that effect. And I said, and my first thought was, well, it's only unexpectedly high if you have not been listening to this podcast. But if you have been listening
Exactly.
to this podcast, you would have been expecting this all along, because we've been talking about this week after week after week.
Yeah.
It is not quite as high as you had predicted.
Yep.
It's close to 900,000.
Yep.
The consensus was for 808,000 new claims, but we are definitely now seeing a trend. It's been up the last several weeks, now the highest it's been since September.
Yeah.
And this is not good, but it's exactly what we thought was going to happen going into the winter months as COVID started to get out of control, and the inevitable, shutdowns plus people's reluctance
Yeah.
to go out has increased. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are, there's still that faction out there that's like, oh, we wouldn't have a problem if the government would just not just let people go out and do stuff.
Mm.
I dispute that. I mean, I agree that yes, if you shut things down, then it affects the economy. We don't really have a test case. We don't have the placebo to test against this to see what would happen if the government just didn't shut anything down. But I suspect that you would see a lot of depressed economic activity anyway, because of the number of people who just
Yeah.
don't want to go outside and hang around other people in the midst of a pandemic. So I I think we're seeing both of those effects right now. It's the enforced shutdowns plus just the dampening of economic activity as a result of people not wanting to be around other people.
Yeah. It's funny. I saw the same headline, right? I saw the number come out. I'm like, just a shy of 900,000. And then I saw it. It said unexpectedly missed. I'm like, who the freaking heck is writing that headline? I mean, are you,
Yeah, I know.
you had to be blind, dumb, and stupid not to see this coming, right? It's,
Yeah, I'm very surprised that, like, the economic experts were so conservative in their estimate of how high unemployment claims would be, especially given the fact that they were higher than the 808 last time around, weren't they? I mean,
they were actually
so
revised higher. They were 857, I want to say. Maybe 837. I think they
yeah,
were 837 last week.
yeah, and the non-seasonally adjusted number last time around was over 900,000.
Yes.
So for them, as things are getting worse, to forecast a lower number, and maybe they were forecasting it because they were thinking about, well, increased holiday sales. Um, that
Maybe.
would, because it's coming into, it's December, it's Christmas season, so there's always a lot of seasonal demand for
Sure.
workers, and
Part-time,
even if
yeah.
they're not in retail establishments now, they'd be in Amazon distribution centers or what have you.
Hmm.
But maybe that's what they were thinking. But the other news that or part of, related to this, is that retail sales are down.
I saw that
And,
Wednesday. Yeah, 1.1% on an expectation of 0.3. Again, folks, this
yeah,
is not good news. Not good
yeah.
news.
So and I think, and connected to this as well, is the fact that we are finally starting to see what I had expected to happen much earlier, but
Mhm.
hadn't happened, which is we're now seeing seeing collections lag in multifamily real estate.
Yeah, we'll
So
talk about that
it's
in
been
its
the
own
first.
own section, but I think I sent you a
Yeah,
note. I'm seeing it just in my portfolio, right? From what would it be? I guess March through November, we were within a point, maybe a point and a half of year-on-year comparison. So
yeah,
not crazy. But December, whew, I think I'm down 6%, but my management company is down 17% across the
wow,
portfolio.
wow.
So Congress, get off your ass. Stimulus is needed. People have burned through savings, and part of the economy is not functioning. And if you let it go, it's going to get worse and worse. It's just going to build on itself.
Yeah. Well, I saw an interesting comment today too. Bless you.
Thank you.
On an article on Seeking Alpha that then I couldn't find when I went back before to find it before the show. I couldn't find it, but I couldn't remember which one it was. But one of the just important things that it pointed out, which is like one of the things that when you read it, you're like, well, oh, duh, but but who thinks of it, right?
Yeah.
Was the issue of, well, look, they're talking about the Fed having run out of juice really to do anything about the economy, and the Fed itself saying, come on, Congress, put money in people's pockets. Like, it only helps so much for us to make interest rates lower for investors.
Yeah.
Or for people who want to buy homes or whatever. That only goes so far. We need to actually put money into people's pockets so they can go out and spend it.
Yeah.
And but what this person very intelligently pointed out was, you can give them the money, but you can't make them spend it, right?
Exactly.
Now, generally speaking, if you give them more money, they will spend more money. But if people are already feeling stressed out and they're feeling like this may be it that they're going to get, or their job is not coming back anytime soon, it's going to cause them to save that money and only use it for essentials. So it's going to keep the economy from falling even further, but it's not really going to create a stimulative effect in terms of like driving economic growth. So, if the bill that comes through and it's looking like maybe kind of sort of we're going to get something, but it's definitely the slimmed down stimulus, not the enormous stimulus that say the Democrats wanted, but better than nothing.
Sure.
It'll help, but in terms of really turning things around, it's difficult. And as I interviewed Ryan Severino, who's the chief economist of Jones Lang LaSalle, for my last mastermind day for my multifamily launchpad members, and Ryan, just came out and said, the recession is the pandemic, and the pandemic is the recession. Until we fix the pandemic, we can't fix the recession.
Yeah.
So, hopefully we get these vaccines that really turn out to be effective, and they're widely, they're distributed fast enough. But everything I've read suggests that it's going to take most of next year to get it fully rolled out. And they're triaging, which they should. And they're going for the healthcare workers first and at-risk populations. But let's face it, a lot of those at-risk populations, they're not going out and spending a lot of money, right? Old folks they're not going to like suddenly start going out and like hitting the clubs.
Yeah,
and,
they're not going on cruise ships.
Like yeah, well, they're probably not going to. Who knows? Maybe they'll go on cruise ships again. But they're generally, when you're at that point in your life, you're not really.
Yeah, you're not the big spender.
Yeah, you're not out there doing a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of taking it easy. So, I think it's going to be a while before we see a real recovery. And I saw something else today which suggested that predictions are for unemployment to be at 5% by the end of next year. I'm a little skeptical about us. 5% has been considered
full employment
employment for most of our history, right?
Yeah.
And the idea that we actually got past full employment, and like, it's a term of art, full employment. So people are like, well, how could you get past full employment? Why is 5% unemployment full employment?
Yeah.
It's just it's an economic theory,
Yeah.
The point is that I just find it hard to believe that, given the number of businesses that have already failed, the number of businesses that are going to fail over the winter, and just the continuing lag on things like tourism.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think the United States has taken a beating in terms of its reputation internationally in its handling of this COVID thing. And I think that it's going to be a few years before we start seeing the levels of tourism that we've seen in the past, just because I think the trust has really gone down internationally in the US. So I'd be really surprised to see 5% unemployment at this time next year.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to say as we wrap this up. First off, I had the same feeling when the Fed actually talked about 5%. I believe we're artificially low just because the way they calculate U3, i.e. women leaving the labor force, all of that stuff, which you and I've
Yeah.
talked about ad nauseum. But that's going to have the reverse effect. As they come back, as daycare opens up and as kids can go back to school, women will come back to the workforce and then be counted. So it's going to be sticky on its way down, right? Elasticity, if you will, is going to be sticky. Second, folks, don't be surprised if next week's unemployment claims is worse. I just want to get that on record now so you don't see stupid headlines about unexpectedly bad. The other thing I want to say is this is not stimulus. I think we need to stop calling it stimulus. This is truly life support for some families. Yeah. It's not stimulus.
I think that's an important point to make too, because when people are talking about Bitcoin later, but a lot of what is driving the growth in Bitcoin is the idea that with all this money that's been pumped into the world, there's going to be inflation, right? And so people are rushing into stuff like Bitcoin because they see it as an inflation hedge. It's not created its own, cycle of fear of missing out, which drives the price higher, and it's unrelated to that. But the thing is that we've been talking about the inflation bomb hitting for more than a decade now.
Oh, easily, yeah.
Right? Ever since the huge stimulus that was passed in 2008.
The original QE.
At the very end of George Bush's term, when they passed an enormous stimulus bill, and people have been saying since then that inflation was going to get out of control, and it didn't. And there's a lot of reasons why it didn't. But one of the reasons was that a lot of what that bill was about was pulling forward spending that was already earmarked, like all the shovel-ready projects, and paying states money, teachers employed, right? So it wasn't like it wasn't helicopter money, right? It wasn't saying like, hey, we've got full employment and now we're just going to dump a bunch of money on people. If you do that, you will get inflation for sure. In that regard, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was probably much more inflationary than the stimulus, because we were at full employment and suddenly they're like, hey, we're going to just cut taxes,
more money,
and add fuel to the fire. And it did. It drove up asset prices even further because of who got their taxes cut, right? But this stimulus bill right now is literally keep people afloat. It's not giving them money on top of their salary. It's replacing money that they would have gotten otherwise. It's filling a hole. It's a huge hole that was dug in the economy.
Yeah, totally agree.
So the idea that this is going to create inflation is kind of, I think, off base. And you see it in the fact that inflation is not responding, right? Exactly. Inflation is, I think they said it's now up to 1.8%. In the last 10 years, in the whole history of inflation over the last 10 years, it hit 3% one time in the last decade, and then dropped back down to 8%.
0.8%.
No, sorry, 1.8%.
1.8%. Sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Yep. So again, as you said, Michael, this is life support. I don't think this is going to lead to inflation. I think deflation is the bigger fear.
Yep.
And so if you're making investment decisions based on your fear of inflation, I'm not sure that is really the best way to be approaching this.
Very cool, folks. Yep. So we'll wrap this one up and pay attention for the next one. We are going to talk about something we teased last week, i.e. rent collections, which we thought were soft, but we weren't sure if they were weekend related. And we're going to talk about some rent decline. So pay attention for that one. Thanks, Jonathan.